Welcome to Notepad. I'm your host Ibrahim Sani. We've heard news this week that the vaccine rollout is well underway, and a lot of us are keeping an eye out on February 21st because that's apparently the first shipment that will arrive in Malaysia. Pending which, how it will be rolled out for the first liners and frontliners, and of course the first year recipients. Those are the things that will still be deliberated in the days to come. Having said that, there's also something that was updated late last week when the EPF announced the i-Sinar withdrawal will now move away from having any form of conditions. They will now open it up for those without conditions. Basically, if you have an EPF and you want money taken out from your i-Sinar, you can. And how it's done is that it's for those account one balance over 100,000, you can withdraw up to amount of 60,000, for which the first payment will be 10,000 and the rest will be tranched out over the next 5 consecutive months. If your account one balance is below 100,000, then you can withdraw up to 10,000 ringgit, and the first payment will be 5,000 ringgit, and then the rest would be paid out over a subsequent of 5 months. So the question is not whether or not, at least in this show, we're trying to decipher this question of not whether or not the EPF is doing a good idea or a bad idea in terms of i-Sinar, the whole program of it, but you as a user, as a member of EPF, whether or not you should, and if you should, how do you go about it? So here trying to decipher all this is a person that I've really looked up to, Rajan Devadisan. Rajan, I can't believe this is my first time having a chat with you on this channel, and it's been a privilege to actually have you on the show.
Ibrahim, thank you very much. I mean, you have interviewed me in the past, back in your old BFM days, but as far as Astro AWANI, I've been on Astro AWANI before, but we haven't interacted directly, as you said, via this particular channel.
All right, and if you guys don't know who Rajan is a well-known licensed financial planner. He has written a lot of books over the past 2 or 3 decades. My first book that I read was back when I was in school, Financial Freedom, Your Guide to Lifetime Financial Planning. That was was read in tandem with Robert Kiyosaki's book, actually, Rich Dad Poor Dad. So those 2 books kind of gave me an indication that I have to really think about how I manage my money differently from what I've been taught in school. And it makes things matters worse because when I was in high school and later on in university, it was all about managing money per se, never managing your own money. And that's the part where we need to speak to people like Rajan to understand a little bit better about the situation that we're in right now and what it means for people like you and me. So Rajan, let's start with the first question.
Certainly.
If I'm in trouble or I need cash now because of the COVID, perhaps I've lost my job, perhaps the situation is in a way where I need cash right now, should I dip my fingers into my savings and go after i-Sinar?
I think for me to be able to give an answer that makes sense, because when this gets broadcast, it'll actually be viewed by a whole spectrum of Malaysians, those who are really having tough times and those who are having semi-tough times. So I want to point out something. This year, I turned 57, so I've been around the block a few times. During the Asian financial crisis of 1997-1998, I was significantly younger. I was in my early 30s at the time, and it was very, very difficult. And I remember praying and hoping that there was some way for me to actually be able to tap into my EPF. But back then, it wasn't allowed. And then if you fast forward a decade after that, we would have hit the global financial crisis. That didn't hurt me as much, and quite frankly, Asia was quite well insulated against the problems that were going on in North America and in Europe. And again, EPF did not loosen its purse strings. Now this time, with the loosening, my short answer is that if you are under tremendous stress and you desperately need money, then yes, i-Sinar is a godsend. But what I am absolutely sure about is that the vast majority of people who actually take advantage of the i-Sinar opportunity will do so not because they really have their backs against the wall. I think they will do so simply because they're under a little bit of stress, and this will relieve their stress. And if I'm speaking to such people, I would say, I beg of you, please don't touch the money unless it's absolutely essential. Now, even if it is absolutely essential and you do take out, say, between 10 and 60,000 ringgit through this new facility, remember that it is your money. And by virtue of taking it out of EPF, you have an immediate benefit because you've got cash in the bank, your stress level drops, and I know how important that actually is. But you are losing the time value of money, you're losing the capacity to compound your wealth. And so this is my recommendation for everybody who's listening to me. The COVID-19 pandemic has impoverished almost all of us around the world. There are 7.8 billion people worldwide, and I wouldn't be surprised if more than 6 billion of us have been made poorer somehow, some way because of this pandemic. Now, if you're going to take money out, and let's say it's between 10 and 60,000, let's just assume you're going to take out 30,000 ringgit. If you don't make a personal commitment to yourself, if you don't set a written goal to say, okay, I'm taking the money out, but I am literally borrowing from my future. If you don't do that, you're not going to repay your future self. So my recommendation is this. If you take out 30,000, I recommend that you just whip out a calculator and figure out what 120% of 30,000 ringgit is. That would be 30,000 times 1.2. It comes to 36,000 ringgit. I would then say that you should make yourself a written goal where you use the next 3 years to work harder than you've ever worked before, work smarter than you've ever worked before, take on a second or even a third part-time gig, but do your level best to replace 120% of what you take out by this time in 2024, say in February 2024. So I think that's a basic guideline that I'm comfortable giving Ibrahim.
And then the question is why 120%, right? We spoke about time value of money just now a little bit, but here's the story at in the long run. When we talk about compounding interest, we're talking about interest that is paid both on principal and on interest. We're looking at 5.45% last year. Sorry, 2019. We don't know what the amount will be like for this year, but it looks like based on the net income on investment earned, it looks like they can pay out up to 5% at least. So we're looking at about the same levels of last year. And you look at all these compounding interest, let's say 10,000 times 5.5%, you get 10,500 ringgit, and you times that by 5.5%, times that 5. And then you start to realize it does add up within the next 3 years, something that is about 120%.
Actually, if I can interrupt you.
Yeah, go ahead.
My feeling is that the compounded interest over the next 3 years will actually come in at less than 20% more. But the reason I've set it at 120 is I want anyone who takes advantage of the i-Sinar facility to end up ahead than where he or she would be. And that's why I'm using 120%.
So the question now is, of course, whether or not we should impose on that item that you spoke of before this, abstinence rather than moderation. Is it better that we move away from dipping our fingers into our savings altogether? Because things might be dire now, but looking back, it's always good to see that you didn't dip your money into your savings. Perhaps a story about when you first got married. That is another interesting story that needs to be told. Can that story of 1997, you got married, can that be tied together with this whole idea of abstinence rather than dipping your finger into the savings?
Okay, Ibrahim, thank you very much. So my wife and I actually got married on October 10th, 1998. The Asian financial crisis began on July 2nd, 1997. It's easy to remember because on July 1st, 1997, Great Britain the United Kingdom handed Hong Kong back to China. One day later, the Asian economy started to topple like dominoes. And the Prime Minister at the time, Mahathir, when he was 4th Prime Minister as opposed to 7th, more recently, he basically decided to go and blame George Soros, but it was a whole bunch of reasons. And we were in very, very bad shape. And you've actually touched on the abstinence and moderation discussion point that we've had in a different context. Basically, what I discovered for myself is that over the long run, I personally, as an individual, can handle abstinence, meaning giving up completely, much better than I can handle moderation. It's actually one of the reasons why I don't drink alcohol. For me, it's easier just to not do it at all. And so when it comes to deciding whether or not you are going to do a good job balancing urgent versus important, what's right in front of you? The urgency right in front is that, you know, our incomes have dropped, many people have lost their jobs, bills can't be paid. It's really very, very tough. And I understand that. And I was very open. I basically said that if in the Asian financial crisis of 97, 1998, if I had had the opportunity to tap into EPF, I would have taken out as much money as I possibly could because I was under tremendous stress. And that stressful period lasted for a couple of years. But now in hindsight, because I wasn't allowed to do it, I'm very grateful because I've had more than 2 decades worth of compound growth on that sum of money back then. So I really do believe that the i-Sinar program has been structured to help the very, very worst hit Malaysians. And, you know, one of the most famous economists in the world, John Maynard Keynes. Keynes was like the greatest economist of the first half of the 20th century. Keynes pointed out very accurately that in the long run, we're all dead. So basically what we need to do is to try and make sure that we balance our needs for today against the needs of tomorrow. But one of the most important things that everyone needs to pay attention to is this. When we talk about retirement planning, now I'm not exactly sure of the demographic for this particular segment, but I would imagine that you've got lots of people who are listening who may be teenagers. You've got lots of people who are in their 20s, in their 30s, in their 40s, in their 50s, in their 60s, 70s, 80s. So it's a full spectrum, demographically speaking. Now, when I was young, the official Malaysian retirement age was 55. And a few years ago, the official retirement age in Malaysia for the public sector started to move from 55 to 56 to 58 to 60. And then after the public sector had moved up in several steps, the private sector moved in one jump from 55 to 60. But based on the research that I have done, for most countries around the world where there is an official retirement age, the official retirement ages right now worldwide tend to be between 62 and 68. The biggest risk that humanity as a whole faces when it comes to retirement planning is longevity risk. Longevity risk means that we are more likely to live a very, very long time than we are to live a short time and have our money outlive us. We're more likely to live a long time and have our money run out.
What do you mean by the longevity risk right now? I mean, is that what I think it is, where you would live longer than your money would?
That's right. And to be able to beat longevity risk, what we need to do is to be very wise in the way that we actually plan for our retirement. There are 2 important things that we need to work on. Number one, and this is something that I have advised all my retirement funding clients, which is pretty much all of my financial planning clients, delay your retirement until you are completely debt-free. Do not retire if you have any debts outstanding. And even if you're targeting an official retirement age of 60, because of the longevity risk side of things, people are very likely to want to, or to end up living till they're, beyond 75, beyond 80, beyond 85, beyond 90. The single largest demographic slice of all of humanity right now is actually the centenarian group, the people who are 100 and above. Again, based on my research, I believe there are probably between 500,000 and 600,000 centenarians alive right now worldwide, people over 100. But by the year 2050, which is less than 30 years away, the estimates of the number of centenarians is between 3.8 million people and 6 million people. And obviously, if the centenarian group is ballooning, the group that's 90 and above when they pass away, or in the high 80s when they pass away, that number is going to grow as well. Now, one of the advantages that we have being Malaysian, being Asian, and if you remember Malaysia, truly Asia, which is a wonderful tagline by our tourism department, one of the advantages we have is, as Asians, we believe in filial piety. So the family structure is so much better for us than it is in the West. But having said that, we are going through very tough times because of this pandemic. And slightly older people who believe that they can rely on their children to prepare well for their retirement, it may be that they have actually brought up their children very well and the children exhibit great filial piety. But those children are definitely members of what I call the sandwich generation. And by the sandwich generation, what this means is, with every passing year, each of us grows 12 months older. And those in the sandwich generation have to take care of their parents. If they were brought up well and they believe that they want to take care of their parents, they have to take care of their own children. As the parents age, the cost of medical cover is going to continue to increase. As the sandwich generation ages, the cost of medical cover will also increase. As the children age, the cost of education is also going to go up. The one plus point from the pandemic is that a lot of people are rethinking the value of very expensive on-site university experiences. And I'm very sure that we're going to see a mushrooming of these online universities. And if that can actually bring down the cost of education, tertiary education, that's wonderful. Unfortunately, when we look at the cost of medical expenses, just for number crunching purposes, financial planners like me actually use annualized healthcare cost increases ranging between 12 and 18%.
So sorry, I have to stop you there. 12 to 18% growth of cost of healthcare every year. Is that it?
Yes, yes.
That's phenomenal. After 10 years, it's going to be more than 120%.
Oh, actually, that's compounding. So even if it's just 12% using the rule of 72, 72 divided by 12 is 6. So if your medical costs compound at 12% a year, in just 6 years, 72 divided by 12 is 6, in just 6 years, you will end up with a doubling of your expenses.
Oh my God, okay.
It is terrifying. And that is why when it comes to building a proper financial plan, it's very important that you basically stay focused on the need to make sure that nothing falls through the cracks. You actually want to make sure that you take care of wealth protection, you want to take care of wealth accumulation, and you want to take care of wealth distribution. And wealth protection is going to be taken care of primarily by insurance, life insurance, which is usually, it's really death insurance, but easier to market if you call it life insurance. Yeah. What I think is by far the most important, the two other that are by far more important than even life insurance for most of us, would be the HNS, hospital and surgical, which is what people generally cover using a medical card, and then their CI cover, critical illness cover. And then just to round off everything, the other kind of insurance most people need to look at, the fourth one would be PA, personal accident. That's just protection. Then you've got accumulation. You've got to focus on your savings. You've got to focus on your investments. An earlier discussion that both of us were privy to, I was also talking about speculation and gambling. But I don't advise gambling, and I think a lot of people who try to speculate end up losing a lot of money. So my recommendation is, if you want to be wise with your money, if you're going to gamble and speculate, ring fence your money so that you only risk 10% of what you've got, and your savings and your investments, including your money in EPF, accounts for 90%. And if you're very wise and you don't gamble and you don't speculate, then 100% should be focused on saving and investing. And then the last bit would be wealth distribution. Wealth distribution for Muslims in Malaysia is very, very different than it is for non-Muslims. So Muslims need to be aware of fara'id, but if they actually write a Muslim will, which is known as a wasiat, they can actually distribute up to a third of their assets to people outside of the fara'id group if they want to. Non-Muslims, on the other hand, have maximum flexibility. And so I would recommend that a conventional will be written. Another very important wealth distribution tool, especially for those who are wealthier, would be a trust of some sort. And this is different from unit trusts. You can certainly use unit trusts in your savings and in your investments, but under wealth distribution, I'm talking about the legal structure of a private trust.
Rajan, thanks. We'll go for a short break. When we come back, we'll discuss a little bit more with Rajan Devadasan. Welcome back. I have with me Rajan Devadasan, licensed financial planner, to talk about how we need to manage our ringgit right now and how we need to manage our wealth, to be precise. Rajan, you were talking about wealth distribution just now before we went into the break. Let's go on with that topic.
Okay, wonderful. So a complete plan should take care of wealth protection, wealth accumulation, wealth distribution. And distribution tools would be, for Muslims, a wasiat, and then the rest of it falls into the fara'id breakdown. For non-Muslims, you can use a will. I recommend that everyone does. And for those who are wealthier, you can also put together a trust. Now, when we talk about accumulation, I recommend that people focus on diversifying their savings and their investments. And I believe it's very important not to put all your eggs in one basket. So you need to diversify. And I recommend that people actually diversify using 3 different dimensions of diversification. That you diversify across different asset classes, you diversify across different geographic regions, and you also diversify across a very, very long timeline. And when you want to save and invest over a long timeline, the best strategy I know of is actually dollar cost averaging. So those are the key things that I want to cover. There are lots of other things we can talk about. So Ibrahim, how would you like to end?
Let's talk a little bit more about delayed gratification, which is part and parcel of what you've been talking about for the longest of time. But let's be reminded about the whole story of how delayed gratification can actually bring about good benefits for you and your wallet.
Absolutely. Okay, happy to do that. I believe that the number one principle for financial success, personal finance success, is delayed gratification. Delayed gratification is the exact opposite of immediate gratification. So remember, we started off this segment talking about i-Sinar, and I was saying that I understand if you're really in dire straits, by all means take advantage of i-Sinar, but at least be tough on yourself and try and make sure that you work harder than you've ever worked before, smarter than you've ever worked before, and try and replace up to 120% of what you have taken out of EPF, put it back into EPF. EPF actually allows us to put in up to 60,000 ringgit per year on our own, above and beyond what flows in because of employment. So that, I think, is very, very wise. So delayed gratification is important. However, I need people to listen very carefully to what I'm saying. Delayed gratification does not mean denied gratification. The last thing you want to do is to be very, very tough on yourself, very, very tough on your family, just hoard all your money, and then one day, because only God knows how long we have, you just drop dead, and then other people get to spend your money. There has to be a balance. But because in retirement planning, there is a higher probability that we will live a long time as opposed to living a short time, I actually strongly recommend that people think about planning for the future, exercise delayed gratification, understand that it doesn't mean denied gratification, it only means deferred gratification. So I hope this helps.
Fantastic. Thank you, Rajan. That was Rajan Devadasan, a licensed financial planner, also the CEO of RD Wealth Creations, Berita. That's it. That's all we have for you tonight. We'll catch you in the next episode.